Okay, Chair, I have my devices rolling and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. I'd like to welcome everyone to a special meeting of the City of Morro Bay Citizens Oversight Committee, acting as the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. And we will call this meeting to order and do a roll call. Homer Alexander.
Present.
Bart Beckman. Lois Johnson.
Present.
Barbara Spagnola.
Here.
Stephen Peck.
Yes, here.
Tina Winner.
Here.
And Tina, is that how you pronounce your last name?
No, you can go for it and call it Wiener.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, it just doesn't have the I.
Wiener, okay. And I'm John Martin, I'm here. So the first item on the agenda is public comments. This is a time set aside for members of the public who want to address the committee on anything within the jurisdiction of the committee or on items on the agenda that they cannot stay for. There will be time to comment on each item as it comes up, but if you can't stay, this will be the time to comment. Anthony, do we have anyone in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you. And are there any announcements by any of the committee members? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the minutes for the January 19th, 2021 meeting. Katie, you said there was an issue with the date of the next meeting, but I think that was correct at the time, right?
At the time it was, because the council took action after your meeting. So that is correct based on what happened at the meeting.
Okay, so nothing needs to be changed as far as that goes. Are there any other corrections or any members want to make any comments on the minutes? Okay, hearing none, can we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Also move.
Second.
CPAC. Motion.
Okay.
I'll second Barbara Spagnola.
Okay. So motion by Steve Peck and second by Barbara Spagnola. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so 6 in favor, no opposed, and 1 absent. Okay, so next item on the agenda is the review of the wastewater reclamation facility quarterly update report, and I believe Eric Caceres is on the meeting here. Are you going to be giving that presentation, Eric?
I believe he is, but he's muted right now.
Oh, there's Bart. Okay. Make a notation that at 3:05 Bart joined us. Hello, Bart.
I'm just gonna check in with Eric Caceres and Rob to make sure.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you,
Eric,
Eric.
we're not getting any video, Eric.
Not now.
Yes. Hey, Eric, how long do you think your presentation will take?
Not very long, I don't think.
You think 15 minutes will be enough?
I could probably keep it to that, yeah?
Okay, thank you. And then we'll hold the questions until you're completely finished. How's that sound?
Okay, you guys gonna start with me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, one second. I just need to run down and make sure everything's going to be quiet here. One second.
Okay, and I'll take a minute to say, we have quite a number of other staff members who are on the call who are going to be here to respond to questions, particularly as it relates to the mid-year budget. So I'll just say to them, since they're on, if you want to stay on, that's excellent. And I would just tell you that I would guess that overall, maybe about a half an hour to 40 minutes. Mr. Chair, does that make sense to you?
Sounds right.
Yeah, so just wanted to give you a heads up that that's about the length of time. Since you're already in the meeting, I think I would recommend that you stay in the meeting so that Dana doesn't have to, unless, John, do you have the capability to let people into the meeting?
No.
And Anthony, do you?
Yes, I do. They end up showing up on attendees. I can promote them to panelists. Is that what you're
Okay.
asking about?
Great. I just wanted to make sure that there was, logistically, I wasn't creating a problem.
No,
Anyways, I just wanted to let the, particularly the department heads and other staff members know that we're about 30 to 40 minutes away. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, Eric, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the CPAC Board, Eric Caceres, the Work Program Manager, thank you guys for having me here this afternoon to discuss the latest Work Quarterly Report through December 31st of 2020. There we go. So this afternoon, asking you to receive the Work Quarterly Update Report and provide input. We will be presenting a similar presentation and giving the council the quarterly report for our meeting next Tuesday, the 23rd. So summary of current project status, just real quick on the current budget estimates. We currently are exceeding our baseline budget that was developed back in 2018 of just around 126 million. Our current budget is just around 138.6 million. Overall, the project is on schedule based on our latest schedule revision that was completed at the beginning of the fiscal year back in July of 2020. Always want to reorient people to the timeline. Our time schedule order with the regional board expires on February 28th of 2023. Currently, we are anticipating substantial completion of the water reclamation facility and the conveyance facilities by July 5th of 2022, about 238 calendar days prior to the deadline. This is a summary of the budget as it has changed over the last 2 or 3 years. We start with over on the left-hand side, the baseline budget, the basis of the rate study, about 126 million. We look at the budget at a deep level at the beginning of every fiscal year, and then we do a rebaselining and do a detailed look every quarter. And so we find ourselves here at the end of Q2 with an anticipated budget of 138.6 million, which has been about the same over the last 2 quarters. We had a jump at the end of Q4, reflecting the results of the bids for the Conveyance Facilities project. New budget reconciliation summary. So what are the changes between, I always have to think about this a little bit if it's not in front of me, the fiscal year Q1 of fiscal year 2021 and Q2 of fiscal year 2022 for the water reclamation facility component of the project budget. The major change here is we transferred funds out of the contingency for the water reclamation facility into the water reclamation facility budget to cover amendment number 4, which was the latest amendment that was approved by council last year. For the conveyance facilities, we increased our projections slightly for ESDC or engineering services during construction. That's primarily for waterworks to support the construction effort. And we increased our budget slightly for archaeological monitoring. We opened bids on that, and we have Cogstone under contract to perform those services. But we did increase kind of the contingency funds in that budget, depending on any changes that we might run into as we go through the construction of the conveyance facilities. For the recycled water facilities, we had a very slight increase in the budget for GSI and the hydrological studies work that they're currently doing. And under general project, we had a slight shift in the budget there for some increased land acquisition costs, just increasing our budget there. I'm currently going through finalizing the cost for the easements for the Vistra property right now. This is something that we started back in 2019. We have our rate consultant, Bartle Wells, who periodically does a re-look at the budget and what the impacts are to rates. So you look over on the left, we've got the 2018 rate study. Focus your attention on the first line, which is essentially the project budget. That was the basis of these analyses. And then there's a couple of things that we looked at. One is the total debt service cost or the present value of total debt service payments. So bringing those into current dollars. And you can see that where we are now over on the far right-hand side, the last look that we did, detailed look was done in November of 2020. So based on our budget at that time of $138.7 million, you can see that the total debt service cost is about $138 million versus what was in the rate study, right around $180 million. And then we also want to look at the maximum annual debt service payment. That was about 5.3 is what we were looking at in the original rate study, and based on the latest analysis, that's about $4.3 million a year. We're planning to do another look at this once we finalize we lock in the rate with SRF. We're currently in the middle of that process. Had a meeting with SRF today. Looking to have a signed loan agreement by beginning of April and looking to lock in the rates at the beginning of March. We're looking at kind of safely the end of the first week of March is when we should have that rate locked. Current rate is right around 0.9%. Key accomplishments and challenges on the general project. Spent a lot of our time just coordinating with SRF. They've saved a lot of their technical review, and financial review and other things till the end here. They've been pretty significantly impacted by COVID. So we've had to do a lot of catch up with them. Their staff has been great, but we've been working really closely with them over the last several months. We also, the City Council adopted the sewer use ordinance last month, which was good. That was an important kind of regulatory milestone, something the city needed to do before we can inject recycled water. And we have been hard at work on the report of waste discharge, which is the key document that we need in order for the city to secure their new ocean discharge permit. On the water reclamation facility, we obviously started construction back in March of 2020. And as of December 31st, we're about 32% complete in terms of the construction of that project. We have negotiated a revision to the wildlife exclusion barrier that came as part of amendment number 3, and that was in response to the biological opinion that we negotiated with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, resulting in about a $470,000 credit. We presented that information to PWAB last night. PWAB endorsed the changes there, and we'll be bringing that change to council next week at the meeting on the 23rd. Most of you are probably familiar with the soil slip that occurred last May, and we experienced another kind of landslide event that occurred right around the 1st of February with the heavy rains. Don't have a lot of information here. We're currently working with the 2 geotechnical engineers and the design build team on next steps in terms of investigation and then how we're going to mitigate that. I can answer some questions about that as we move forward and you guys ask your questions. On the conveyance facilities, we executed 2 major contracts, one with Cogstone Resource Management for archaeological monitoring and one with Kevin Merck for biological monitoring. We awarded a contract and issued a notice to proceed to Anvil Builders. out of San Francisco for construction of the pipeline. We are in the middle of the process for the streambed alteration agreement that we need for a portion of the pipeline segment. We received our approval in January to begin construction on this component of the project from the Coastal Commission. And we began some pre-construction activities along the pipeline alignment, mainly tree removals in the area of the bike path. Again, another item that I can discuss further during Q&A. For the recycled water facilities, we've completed the design of the pilot injection well. GSI has done that. We're finalizing the front-end documents, and we're getting that into construction very soon here. We're slated to install and begin our injection testing in April of this year. And we've been meeting closely with Division of Drinking Water after we submitted our draft Title 22 engineering report. This is kind of the companion report to the report of waste discharge. Report of waste discharge deals with the ocean discharge, and the Title 22 engineering report is all about groundwater injection. This is our project dashboard, and looking at a comparison of where we are today, or at December 31st, compared to the baseline or the beginning of the fiscal year. Again, we had that budget increase of about 6% associated with the bids that we received for the pipeline portion of the project. So there's a number of items there that deal with how the budget components have been modified since the beginning of the fiscal year. We also look at the program manager earned value. We're tracking right along with our spending. Schedule performance index based on our revised schedule from the beginning of last fiscal year. We are performing a little bit above schedule. Item number 4 is one that I'm excited about, because soon that column there that says 0.0 linear feet is going to start showing a number there, which is great as we move into beginning to install pipe here in the next couple of weeks. And then that compliance date countdown, we have about 715 days until we'll be in compliance, or about 238 days before we need to be in compliance against that February 28th, 2023 deadline. This graph here shows our current versus planned expenditures. The line in blue shows the planned cumulative expenditures for that we projected at the beginning of the fiscal year 2020, 2021, and the red is showing kind of where we're currently tracking. Expenditures to date. This table here shows our total contracted costs that have been spent to date, which is just shy of $35 million. We have a total contracted amount of $121 million against our program budget of $138.6 million. So you'll see a large portion of the total budget has been contracted. So that $35 million is contracted cost, or actual spending to date, when you take into account all of the city costs, and that would include city staff time, expenses by staff for sampling, those types of things, and land acquisition. We're at about about $38.6 million. This shows the schedule overview, and again, draw your attention to the bottom left. It shows the project SPI. Again, we want to see that number above 1, and program percent complete for the overall program going back to 2013. We're about 76% complete there. This table is kind of a breakdown of the key milestones for the project, and so I'll just direct your attention to the column on the right-hand side. We're seeing a lot of actuals, which is great. A couple of upcoming milestones that we're looking at. Mainly, the big ones here are for the pipelines or the conveyance facilities. We're looking at a substantial completion date of January 8th of next year. And we're looking at a substantial completion date of July 5th of next year for the water reclamation facility. And that's an important thing to note. That relationship between those two dates is one of the most important dates that we track because the pipelines need to be completed well before the treatment plant is completed for testing and those kinds of things. In terms of schedule recovery strategies, if you got your report, that overall schedule that we showed, the item that we are still showing a little bit behind schedule is the hydrogeological support, mainly because of some challenges in just moving along the pilot injection well design and installation. So we're continuing to push that forward as soon as possible. We've talked a little bit about this before. Our schedule is pretty conservative as it pertains to the design and construction of the recycled water facilities. And as soon as we finish the hydrogeological work, we're going to do everything we can to push those forward and reduce the schedule on those, since those are the last activities that will need to be done before the project is complete. In terms of schedule activities, one of the main things that we're currently doing is we are incorporating the baseline schedule that we received from Anvil, the contractor for the pipelines, into our program schedule. So right now we have our overall program schedule that includes key construction dates for the water reclamation facility in terms of testing dates, completion of construction, and substantial and final completion. We currently have the same information in there for in our schedule, and we're working on and including some of these intermediate milestones within our program schedule. This figure here is something that we've developed kind of as a roadmap showing how the pipelines are going to be constructed based on the contractor's baseline schedule. So the different colors correspond to the different segments of the pipeline, and the schedule up at the top right-hand corner kind of shows the sequence of how these segments of pipe are going to be constructed. I wanted to talk a little bit about public outreach because that's another very important item that we've been focusing on here as we are gearing up and starting construction. On the right-hand side, and I'll use this as a shameless plug for anybody listening, if you're looking for information on traffic control, road closures, detours, please go to www.morrowbaywrf.com. Up at the top, you'll see construction information. You can click on that, and it will take you to the latest construction information for the project. If you go to that page, you'll see a static map there that shows the two locations where we're going to first be beginning construction. That static image is going to be replaced here in the near term. With this figure on the left that's been generated in GIS. It will be an interactive map where people will be able to go to this page and they'll be able to click on individual segments of the pipeline, and they'll be able to see when those segments are going to be constructed. And I've shown here in this figure the first segment. So if somebody clicks on that first segment, they'll also see the detour routes that are associated with that segment, and they'll be able to access the detailed traffic control plan that is reviewed and approved by the city engineer. So all of that information will be included in the GIS map. The other cool thing, and it's a little bit hard to see here because it's small, but folks will be able to zoom in on this when they're in the website, is that picture of the water reclamation facility, or that flyover, is real time of the progress of the facility. On a weekly basis, we do a drone flight of the facility, and we can map that to this map, and so you can people can see kind of in real time what's going on at the water reclamation facility. Other public outreach efforts, the city recently had a new press release on February 4th talking about the beginning of construction, again directing people to the website and our hotline if they have questions about construction or traffic control or any road closures. And then we also have door hangers that we've been putting up along the pipeline route, both 7 days and 24 hours before we start construction in a given area. And those door hangers are both in English and in Spanish on the back. So this is some of just the print media that we're doing. We also have some radio spots that we're developing, and we are having a meeting tomorrow with the local Quintana businesses, and we'll be having monthly check-ins with the Quintana businesses for the duration of construction along Quintana. That is the presentation, and with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. That was pretty good. I think we got you in there at 18 minutes, so that's, well done. Thank you. Let's start with Barbara. Barbara, do you have any questions for Eric? Oh, Barbara, you're muted.
Yes, I do. I have a quick question on the other contracts. I think it's table 3.4, but anyways, ESA, I think Far Western and another one, 3 of them, Eric, were 95% plus contracted. Are we pretty much done with those 3 suppliers, or is there going to be anything else required there?
Yeah, ESA is virtually done, and so I'll be removing them from kind of the active list, and they'll fall off of here. We do have ongoing work with Far Western. We actually are bringing an amendment for Far Western to council next Tuesday for continued archaeological work that they need to do to support the project. And what's another one here? I think those were the 2.
Oh, it's the land or the surveying company.
We have Joanne kind of as an on-call surveyor, and we've had to use her for some different things for land acquisition, and some other things. So I've kept her on here because we may have the need to amend her contract in the future.
So when you have to do an amendment like that for the first one, does that come from contingency then, or is there some other budget that'll cover that?
Yeah, that comes from, I have individual contingencies for the individual contracts that we have. So we're tracking spent to date, what their current contract is, and then what we anticipate their amendment would be. So we are holding dollars in addition to what they've already been contracted to do that would cover any future amendments.
Okay, thanks. And just one quick note, I think about 5 or 6 slides back on the project cost summary, it looked like 2 column headings were switched around on the percent versus the total cost, but it was correct in what you sent out. So you may want to check that.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Let's go to Bart next. Bart, you're muted.
Okay, I've got a couple comments and a few questions relative to these. They all have to do with what I submitted. I asked about when we'll reanalyze the study, and the answer was about March, April. And what I strongly encourage to Scott, as he knows we've talked about this, is that we need to maximize this low interest money. It's been very unclear to me, somewhat because of negotiations, as far as if we're going to get the full 63 million, or we have the possibility to get the full 63 million from WIFIA. It's been a little unclear as to whether or not we can get an equal amount from SRF. But needless to say, we have a lot of needs for funding of things such as the infrastructure, because we're taking money that has been collected for infrastructure and using it to fund this plant. So I'm hoping the answer was, what's our role? It says review and comment. So hopefully before that's finalized, we get to review and comment. My next question had to do with the water reclamation estimate. As hopefully some of you recall, I was questioning for quite a while the fact that the conveyance part was supposed to, by contract, have a new estimate. For some reason, that part of the contract was not enforced. As we found out, there was a rather substantial increase in the cost that was identified after the election. So my comments has to do with, since this number basically is the same number from 2 or 3 years ago, based on a design that's changed, I suspect that something else has changed in this case also. So why it was unclear is why I was asking the question. I think it's pretty clear to me that if you change concepts, and we've gone through time, and with every other aspect of this going up, why would we not expect the water reclamation to go up? The next part, and this is a question, what percentage state water could be offset by the design that's currently in place. So if we actually, I understand now that basically there's no plans to even do this, but if we did say that there's a huge drought and we need the water, how much of the state water could be offset by the reclamation part of this project?
No, those are all really good questions, and so
the only question I had was relative to the last one. What percent of state water could be offset if we actually pull the trigger on the reclamation plan? We're spending about basically half of the plant is done, so we could reclaim water, and the reclamation part is for that. So if we actually pulled the trigger and did it, which I understand we're not planning on doing that, but if we did, how much of state water could be offset?
okay, yeah, good. I'll answer that one first, and then I can comment on the other two because I do have some information on those. So yeah, to answer your question about state water, the facility is going to produce at the end of the day, it will have the capability to produce just north of about 800 acre feet a year. The city's current potable water demand is 1,000 acre feet per year. So it's about 80% of the total water usage that the city is using right now. However, the contract that we have for state water is just north of 1,300 acre feet. So the city pays for a state water allocation of about 1,300 acre feet, which it doesn't use currently. The water demands aren't that high. The water demands are about 1,000. Now, if you go back to the One Water Plan and you look at long-term projections and where water usage could go, we're looking at about 1,400. So in a perfect world, if the city were to expand and the water usage would go up, it would get right close to that 1,400 number, and you would use pretty much all of your state water would cover that, and you wouldn't need any supplemental water. But you have the 800 acre feet from the recycled water facility. So, you know, I don't know if that was, now that I say it back to myself, it's a little confusing, but.
Well, okay, you're confirming the 80% number that had been quoted previously. I do want to point out to everybody, if they read in the papers recently, Cambria had a rather large settlement because of some design issues up there that didn't meet expectations. That wouldn't necessarily be the case here, but that was a concern. Vistra, I'll pass over that comment. You'll pass over. The other one I want to comment on, and this is, who is the council liaison?
The council liaisons, oh, sorry, excuse me. I was thinking subcommittee, work subcommittee, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
The CFAC or to the WRF project?
CFAC.
It's the mayor.
Okay. Obviously, he's chosen not to be on the Zoom, but he's probably listening. Basically, this is something I've talked about a lot, and I asked about the question. Basically, a statement came out from staff that said all of the One Water projects are covered in the current rates. Everyone needs to fully understand what they're saying here. Basically, on infinitum, we're going to collect something like $2 million for infrastructure projects. But up until now, the city has chosen such that they can make it look like there's funding the plant at a certain rate. They're using money collected for infrastructure to pay for the power plant. So when they say the costs for infrastructure covered, fundamentally, if they may not even start for 20 years to do infrastructure, and they technically are going to be correct. Whether or not that's acceptable to the city and the council, I don't know. But basically, if you look at the worksheets for both the 2015 and 2018 rate cases, it said we would have by this point actually done about $20 million worth of work. And the city has decided to not do that and instead use those funds to offset the funding of WRF. which leads back to my other point on we need to get as much low-cost funding as possible to hopefully use for the infrastructure. So while, again, technically their comment is right, and hopefully everybody understands what I'm saying here, is that they're fundamentally using money, taking money and pushing it out. So if the mayor or anybody would like to discuss that further, I do have a white paper to back up, support what I've said. That's all, John.
Thank you, Bart. Let's see, let's go on to Lois. Any questions, Lois?
Yeah, really the only thing I was interested in discussing was the soil slip. You probably recall that happened at Cal Poly. It was a very expensive problem because it ran into a dorm. And in that case, there was engineering done after the fact and some sort of mitigation on the soil to prevent future slip. In reading the report, I think it's on page 3, it says that the responsibility for the cost of the investigation and remediation has not yet been determined. So I'm assuming it's not in the 138 number. And I'm assuming also that that's the February slide, or is that the May slide? Somewhere else I read that it was an ancient slip, related to some ancient soils. So it was determined not to be the responsibility it was determined to be the city's responsibility. So I just want some clarification on that. And then if we have an idea of what it's going to cost, whether or not there's any insurance coverage for it. And so that's all I have on wastewater.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I'll speak to the soil slip that occurred in May first. Essentially, that soil slip occurred in May. The design engineers, geotechnical engineer of record, did some investigations, mapped what they believed to be the limits of that slide, and material to the tune of about 12,000 cubic yards was removed, and that material was removed, and the finding was that was the result of an ancient landslide, resulting in an unforeseen condition for the contractor, and ultimately the city paid about $280,000. $80,000 of that was engineering work, and another $200,000 of that was the actual earthwork to remove the material and regrade the hillside. And so that was the May issue. That change order is reflected in the project budget, and it has been taken, and that piece has been taken care of. I don't want to get into too much detail on the current slide that's happened. And even whether or not it's part of the previous slide or a new event, and we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns right now, and it's kind of a sensitive topic. It potentially could be a sensitive topic legally. So, in talking with the city attorney and folks, I think that's kind of all we want to say about that. We'll have an update for folks as soon as we have more information. But that's where we are right now.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Let's go to Homer now.
I don't have any comments or questions. I submitted them yesterday, and hopefully I'll see the answer soon.
Okay, thank you, Homer. Tina?
Just clarifying questions based on previous members. Hi, Eric. Hey, and one comment. I'm a geek, so the interactive map is cool. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. But so Lois's question, while I respect what you said about not having a lot of knowns and potential issues for why you wouldn't comment more, is there a time frame for when you will be thinking that you'll know how to speak to this issue? I mean, are you looking at a timeline there? I know. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I would say, potentially by the next CPAC meeting, we would have more information. We are going to be discussing it, and there is some time sensitivity there in terms of when the investigation work needs to get underway and everything else.
Okay.
So it's a couple of months, not 6 months, I would say.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then this question isn't so much to you as it might be partially you, but I wanted to address a question of order that I'm confused about procedurally. So, John, Bart's question or Bart's reference to the council liaison, which is the mayor this time around, and the potential 20 million from infrastructure going towards the wharf. How and when does that actually get addressed? I mean, does the mayor come to a CFAC meeting and address that? Is it done at PWEB? I mean, how exactly is that followed up upon? I'm confused about procedural.
This is Scott speaking. The mayor doesn't go to advisory boards to speak. We can answer questions, and I believe we did, though there wasn't posed to us directly, the question that Mr. Beckman raised.
Sorry, Scott.
Certainly, we can provide more information about the One Water projects, and I think those are flagged in the mid-year budget update under the CIP section.
Okay.
We're fully committed to moving forward with those projects and getting through those and then getting to the next tier of priority projects outlined in the One Water plan. Fully intend to continue to make progress as we can. The wharf is certainly the biggest project and has absorbed a lot of our time.
Right.
But yeah, no, your staff are the ones who can report back on those things.
Okay.
Typically, it's not the liaisons. The liaisons don't get put into the Zoom meeting. They watch from afar. That's why.
Got it. I wasn't sure. That's why I said it was procedural on my part. And I didn't
no problem. That's a good question.
Order of events. And so, okay, cool. So waiting for the next topic that we're going to cover anyway. Thank you.
Scott, the answer that we got relative to my questions was these are things prioritized by the city council. So I think it's fair. So if that response was not accurate, then.
No, they're prioritized, but the staff are the ones that carry it out, and we're the messengers per council direction, not the council members themselves. It's just unorthodox for them to come present to advisory boards.
This is Rob. I think I answered that question, and basically what I was getting at is council adopts a budget that includes capital projects in it that the staff will then carry out. So we have 3 One Water capital projects in this current budget, 2 wastewater projects and 1 water project. All 3 are under design by outside design engineers, Cannon Associates. We're at about 30% design on our wastewater projects, a little behind that on our water storage tank and water system improvements, but we can get into more details during the next item if need be.
Thank you, Rob. Tina, any other questions?
No, thank you, John. That's good for me.
Okay, thanks, Tina. Let's go to Steve, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my comment is kind of high level for Eric. All the big ticket items seem to have been bid out by now. Could you give us an idea of how much contingency is left for the remaining hard cost of construction? Just try to get a percentage.
No, that's a good question. So we currently have in our contingency budget about $3.4 million of construction contingency. That number is going to go up slightly if council adopts and approves the amendment that was presented to PWAB last night. That's going to a change order in the positive direction and would take money out of the the design build team's contract and put it back into our construction contingency bucket. So that 3.4 million will go up to about 3.7 million if that happens. So that's what we've got in terms of our construction contingency budget at this point in time.
And the remaining construction that would apply to what? Just looking for, is it 3%, 3.2? I'm looking for kind of a percentage to get some comfort on that.
Yeah, I'd have to just do a little bit of math here on the fly to see what the percentage would be. But we in round numbers, we have about, I'll just speak in the future here and assume that the credit will go through council next week, but we'll have a contingency of about $800,000 or a little over $800,000 on our contract with the design build team. That's right around 75 million. So not a lot of contingency there. We have about right around 8% contingency for the construction of the pipelines that we bid. So it's roughly $2.5 million against about a $31 million contract that we currently have with Anvil Builders. And then for the recycled water facilities and the injection wells, those have a construction cost of about $3 million. And the contingency on that is about 3% or about $300,000. So that's how that kind of $3.7 million breaks out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Eric, I have a couple of things. Could you repeat what the current interest rate is for the SRF loan?
The current interest rate for SRF is 0.9%.
So 0.9.
Yes, 0.9.
Okay, thank you. On that SRF pay request number 3, what's the situation there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not laughing. Yeah, we had a little bit of an issue with some things that we were submitting for WIFIA reimbursement and the SRF planning loan reimbursement at the time, and we had to kind of reconfigure that reimbursement request, and we resubmitted it. And we have continued to ask for updates from SRF, and I hate to blame COVID on this one, but they have been really slow in their review and processing and payment of that request. We just talked about it again actually today, and that review is ongoing. So at the end of the day, do I think that there's going to be an issue that we're not going to get that roughly, I think it's about $5 million without having it in front of me for that last reimbursement request? No, absolutely not. I think we're definitely going to get the money. I don't know what's going on right now with that planning loan review and reimbursement and why it is taking so long, but it is something that we continue to talk to our SRF project manager about on a bi-weekly basis.
Okay, well, an editorial comment here, but it looks like things move back and forth between Morro Bay and Washington, D.C. much more efficiently than between Morro Bay and Sacramento.
I will say that EPA has been amazing in terms of their ability to review and approve and submit payment. It's about 2 weeks after their approval, and their review is pretty prompt. So historically, the SRF program, it has been slow to get repayments. This one is taking exceptionally long.
Well, I'm glad to see that WIFIA is working out a lot better, because if WIFIA was working out the way SRF has been, the city would have a definite cash flow problem.
Don't disagree.
I just wanted to add to Eric and Rob's credit, this is a topic that gets discussed at every meeting. I was in the meeting, I think it was last week, for a very relatively short period of time working on some other pressing matters, but we have expressed to them, and I think in no uncertain terms, how disappointed we are and that while we're not lacking for cash right now, we have said that it's urgent because we don't want to send the message that they can dilly-dally any longer than they already have. And so we have been strenuous in our advocacy, but also being sensitive to the fact that we don't want to alienate the people who are in the agency, because we'd hate to find that our request has gotten lost again. And so we have to start from scratch. And so we're navigating that, what I'll call office politics of the process, because it's not the person who we're dealing with that is really the problem. It's some others in the agency, and she has to be our advocate within their structure. So I just wanted to assure you that we are very focused, laser beam focused on this issue, in addition to all the other issues that the team is looking at.
Thank you.
Just as Lois, if necessary, could we ask for our representative's assistance?
We could. I would suggest to you having, and Eric, you might have an independent position. You know, you only get to do that a very few number of times, and like maybe once, until you've used up all of those opportunity tickets. So I want to make sure that we're using that at a moment in time when we really do have a cash-related problem. So yes, we can and we will. And we can talk about it on the next item, but we're planning to meet with representatives of Congressman Salud Carvajal's office about our FEMA reimbursement requests related to COVID expenses, to find out how they could help us navigate the differing information we're getting. So thanks for that.
We're in a little bit of a precarious position because we are, weeks away from finalizing a loan for upwards of $66 million. So, I think that's part of it too, is we obviously know that this $5 million, we, in terms of cash we need, and we're trying to focus our attention on kind of getting the loan agreement finalized. And so I think that's kind of where we've been trying to play a little bit. We're not taking our foot off the gas too much on the reimbursement, because we're also not really aggressive, because we've been very aggressive on getting the construction loan agreement signed. So I think...
Yeah, but one state, one federal, right?
No, we have a federal, well, it's all federal money, or a lot of it's federal money, because a lot of the state money is just funneled from the federal government through the state. But we've got a $62 million loan with WIFIA, which is federal. And then we've got the $10.3 million planning loan, which is what we're talking about here. And then essentially the remainder of the project will be funded by SRF to the tune of right around $66 million.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Just one last question. Is PWEB reviewing the hydrogeologic reports for the groundwater recharge portion of the project?
Yeah, we brought several of our reports to them for review. I think the last one that we brought to them would have been in the middle of last year. Right around June, July is when we finalized our phase 2 work, which was absolutely positively we want to locate our injection wells on the west side of the highway, and we brought that to PWAB, and then we also brought it to council probably in August, September of last year.
And that was the last one. Okay.
That was the last one.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other last minute questions? Okay, well, I think we have done our work here on this item, and it's going to go to the council at their next meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you.
Well, thank you, Eric. And Katie, I think we can move on to the next item then. So the next item is the review of the fiscal year 2021 second quarter budget performance report. So Katie, I'll turn that over to you. Uh-oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm new to this. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this matter before you. I believe that we sent the responses to questions. I've forwarded them on to Homer to ensure that he got them at both the city email, and since he's traveling, to his personal email. I apologize for not remembering that you'd asked for that earlier, Homer. The news overall is looking more positive than we definitely anticipated, even at the first quarterly review. I'm not going to go over the report item by item, but I will say that in general, there's a lot of work that's gone into producing this report. I want to thank the staff that has supported us, especially the finance staff and Sandy Martin. Overall, we're recommending some fairly significant changes in our revenue budget, particularly in the general fund. Those are based on analysis and assessments of where we are as of the December 31st date. Particularly of interest may be our transient occupancy tax, which is our hotel tax. As of the end of December, we had exceeded, or were very close to exceeding, the annual amount that we anticipated receiving over the course of the entire 12 months. And during September, October, and November, according to the chart that we provided, we actually exceeded the previous year's pre-COVID numbers. I don't think that that's a particularly surprising thing, given that there were a lot of people who had cabin fever and wanted to get out, and Morro Bay was a wonderful place to come during the summer and during the fall. It's hard to tell what travel practices are going to be going forward. So we've selected a very conservative number to anticipate that we would receive about half of the amount that we would have anticipated receiving if we looked at the rest of the year from January of 2020 to June of 2020, the end of June, and that included the terrible months of March, April, and May. So we feel like we're in a better situation than that period of time, but we wanted to be able to exceed the expectations as opposed to getting ourselves in a position where we were recommending an overly optimistic view of the circumstances and then had to cut back as we got closer to the end of the fiscal year, which is a very difficult challenge. In terms of sales tax, we find ourselves in a very similar situation, not quite as dramatic as with the transient occupancy tax, but certainly in a positive position. And again, we've recommended, not based on our own assessment, but in this particular case, the assessment of HDL, which is a sales tax consultant that works with the city and many other cities to assess the industries that the city has sales tax coming in from and what we should anticipate as revenue sources. We are recommending wildfire mutual aid reimbursements. And again, we're trying to take a very conservative approach in terms of refunding the general fund for all of those expenses, but not taking credit at this point in time for all of the reimbursements because we don't have state approval of a few of those claims that we made. So again, we tried to go the prudent approach to leaving some money to be budgeted when it comes in or when we get approval from the state for those reimbursement numbers. We are recommending to the council that we do recommend the appropriation of cannabis tax money. And again, we're doing it on a conservative approach. If you take the first 2 months of operation, which were November and December, that amount of money would have been on average about $15,800. But we're not recommending that we recognize that amount for the rest of the year. We're recommending approximately $15,000 for the first 2 months, and then $12,500 for the remaining months. That's twofold. One of those months was the holiday month. It was a brand new business in town. There might have been some novelty associated with it that will end up dissipating over time. And then we are anticipating that the other cannabis outlet, NHC, will come online in the late winter, early spring, and we're not recommending any recognition of revenue from that outlet because we just have nothing to base it on. Once we have 2 outlets, we don't know how much of a drain that will come off of the first outlet, and so we decided that it was more prudent not to even make a guess at that and wait until we have some experience with that revenue source to be able to go ahead and make a more educated recommendation through the budget process. And then on the expenditure side, we're making a recommendation on the general fund side to recognize the wildfire reimbursements for mutual aid. We're also recommending that some portion of that that is above and beyond that which we need to make the line items whole in the fire department go into some additional equipment, PPE, personal protective gear, and other small tools, as well as putting a payment into the fire small vehicle replacement fund so that the 2 vehicles that are intended to be replaced, which are CFAC has discussed providing support in Measure Q for, that there will be some general fund dollars available for that. In the police department, well, let me just finish on public works in general. Go on to public works. One is we're recommending some additional $48,100 be associated with consolidated maintenance, where we know they're going to go over budget and don't have the capacity, the elasticity within their budget to cover it. So that relates to water use, which was reduced in this year's budget, but it was done in a more broad-based way than in a focused way. And then also for dark fiber, which was connecting the corporation yards to the city hall and to the dark fiber network so that they would have enough capacity to have access to internet and those other things. And then lastly, the last item for consolidated maintenance is garbage disposal, so trash collection, basically, which we've seen a great need for. Others who were on the call and who were here during COVID can talk more eloquently than I can about the trash crisis that we've seen, and we want to stay ahead of that for this summer season. With the police department, we're recommending the allocation of $30,000 to be added to insurance so that we can purchase a used vehicle to replace one that was damaged beyond use in an accident, not caused by the police department, but by somebody else. And then we have recognized the need to have employee pre-employment dollars spent, and in the police department that has exceeded their budget, and they very prudently spend their dollars, and they spend almost every nickel of it every year, and so there was a request for $6,000 for pre-employment. In the finance department, and Scott can speak to this as well as I can, but we're also recommending that there be a reclassification of the finance director, not that it would impact me, but the next permanent finance director, and to change the job responsibilities, the job spec, and make the compensation commiserate with the public works director. And then we're also suggesting that we make an allocation of $125,000 for emergency storm drain repair. In Measure Q dollars, we're recommending both a revenue enhancement and an expenditure enhancement of $142,000 based on the expert advice from HDL. That be spent on our pavement management program. I know that there's a lot of attention towards getting that project on the ground and in the ground, I guess. And so we would recommend that take place. And then in the harbor fund, what's not included in your staff report, but given the council's direction to move forward with the RV camping program, there will be some changes that are proposed to the council that are not proposed in your report. So I didn't want that to be a surprise to the CFAC. So overall, I think that we're moving in the right direction. We really appreciate your very detailed review of the reports. Many of the questions or comments resulted in us looking at some of our charts and the narrative, and so a lot of that was just oversights on our part, making sure that since there's multiple documents, just making sure that they all match ultimately, and we were making changes to the last minute. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to make a presentation to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions, including the ones that were presented to us or any others. As I said earlier, we have a lot of people on the line who are subject matter experts in many of these topics, and so if you don't call on them, I may ask them to step up to answer a question that they might be more capable to answer than I can.
Thank you, Katie. Before we go to questions from the members, I've neglected to ask for public comments on the prior item regarding the WARF quarterly update. Anthony, were there any people in the queue who had questions?
Thank you, Chair. No, there are no raised hands in the queue and no raised hands during this whole discussion.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and open it up to questions from members. Stephen, let's start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Katie. Good news. Yay. I had some questions about some of the line items. The reference on the pavement management plan, maybe this is a question for Rob. It just said pavement management plan, $142,000. Is that for the plan or is that to implement the plan? Is that actually micro surfacing and that sort of thing? So the 10-year-old plan that we have, we're still implementing that. So the 142 isn't to hire a consultant.
No, that's for actual construction on the ground. So we did last year do an update to our pavement management planning document with an outside consultant in the neighborhood of $25,000. I think it cost us to update that plan. But this year we plan to put some pavement on the ground, mainly in the form of a stopgap repair project for our arterial and collector streets, which such as Main Street, Harbor, Pacific, South Bay Boulevard, that if we don't do some pretty significant repairs, it's going to be very expensive to repair in the future.
My other question is simply an arithmetic question, and I sort of alluded to this with a spreadsheet that I sent about midday, and that's, so after all the expenditures are made, you recognize the revenue, in the general fund in Measure E, how much do you anticipate out of these revenue and expense adjustments will go into the general fund emergency reserve? How much are we replenishing it in this budget cycle?
That is an excellent question, and I've added a chart to the City Council agenda report to make that really clear. And so let me just go to that chart, and I can share my screen with the committee, and I will find it right here.
And maybe while you're finding that, sort of remind us how much we advanced from that fund and how much needs to be replenished in total.
So anticipated last year, and maybe I can ask Sandy to pull those numbers up while I'm searching. Oh, here it is. I can get to it pretty quick, Sandy, thanks. Oops. Oh. Share my screen. So I've highlighted it in yellow.
Okay.
So this is the general fund emergency reserve for purposes of background. Last year, we actually transferred 1.177 from the GFER into the general fund. And so we started with 3.8 million, we ended with 2.3 million. Our budget anticipated that we were going to contribute 1.283. And if the mid-year budget is adopted, we would need to transfer $731,000, which is that cell, and we would end the balance with 2.285. This takes into account about an extra $282,000 in revenues and some additional costs in expenditures because we're making those expenditures. So the net difference between what we expected at the beginning of the fiscal year and what we would anticipate the general fund emergency reserve fund balance to be at the end is a total of $834,000 to the better, which is 58% change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Let's go to Tina next.
No questions. Thank you, John.
Okay, Tina, thank you. Let's go to Homer.
I submitted my questions and comments yesterday.
Okay, were they all answered, Homer?
Yes, the only thing I was going to say for Rob Livick is that I'm hoping when he said put material on the ground, he meant actual asphalt.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's go to Lois.
Just kind of an observation with the recommendations to increase staff and the passage of Measure E. I'm not questioning that the staff are needed. I mean, the public works position, and then to elevate the finance position, probably, you know, I mean, the city's just been hobbling without having a deputy city manager. You know, I'm sure that's been difficult, and it's far less money than that position, and I get that. It's just a public perception, having just passed Measure E. And then also we had a comment from a citizen, Meredith Bates, to the CFAC members, sort of imploring us to consider, I don't know, the CFAC has the authority, but, you know, consideration long-term in trying to keep police officers by paying them a higher wage. I just want to recognize her comment. And again, it's just a matter of public perception. And that's no question, no need to respond.
Thank you, Lois. Barbara, you have questions?
My apologies. Yes, I also agree with what Lois said. I want to make sure I understand. Basically, Katie, what you were saying is you were just going to upgrade the description of the finance director position and call it something else. Would that person still be also the finance director plus overseeing some other things, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the additional costs is the difference between the current salary and the upgraded salary, which is consistent with the Public Works Director's salary.
Oh, I see. Okay. You weren't talking about, I'm sorry, you weren't talking about adding another position, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay, that's fine. And then on the final recommendation, I think on the Measure E, to go back to the Emergency Reserve Fund, I think there could be an issue there with public perception as well. I guess my concern is, I think my concern with that is if we're going to put it back in the reserve fund, or are we planning to maybe move it back to transfer it back later to police or fire or anything? Sometimes I think that's a little bit confusing. And this is the first, the voters voted for this in November. This will be the first expenditure. So I'm just not sure. I'd be interested in what my colleagues think about the putting it in the emergency reserve. Just a comment.
Barbara, if I could respond to that, it's a great point. And Katie, I had a lot of back and forth on this and had that discussion numerous times, and sort of with this just getting off the ground. And it's important to remind everybody that the title of the measure is recovery in it. You know, this is in a lot of ways a recovery measure, and both, you know, from the structural issues we had prior to and those exacerbated by COVID. So it allows us to do all those things, all the things that the measure purports to do to support public safety, clean and inviting and safe public spaces. We don't have our reserves buttoned down. We can't do those things when we hit the next emergency. So it was framed within that context. So I know it can be a little challenging with all the different funds and whatnot, but I think it comports with what we took to the community in sort of discussions with the ad hoc group and council as to its purpose. So moving forward, we certainly want to get input from this committee, which will ultimately oversee Measure E. But we felt it was the pertinent move given where we are and the fact that we're still recovering from a once in 100-year pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Lois's points are well taken. I know she didn't ask for a response, but I know we can't talk about it because they're negotiations, but we're knee deep in those and very good conversations, and point well taken, Lois.
Thank you, Barbara. Bart?
No comments, John.
No? Okay, thank you. Barbara, did you have anything else?
I have something.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, Homer, Jim.
I just wanted to follow up on Barbara's comments. As you know, and as a number of members of this committee, we're very involved in Measure E, both in the campaign and financial supporting of the measure. But I talked to an awful lot of people, and what I told the various people that I talked to was that for the next couple of years, a good portion of Measure E would be used to rebuild the emergency reserves. And the other half of it could be used to add to this public safety in the city. But anybody that I talked to, when I told them that the reserve need to be replenished, seemed to think that was a great idea. And we're very supportive. That's all.
Hey, thank you, Homer. Can you do a question about Measure E? Is it going to have a separate fund, or is it going to be combined with Measure Q?
No.
Oh, it's going to have a separate fund so that there can be separate accounting for it.
Okay. And then has the council decided that this committee is going to be the oversight committee for Measure E also?
In asking Scott that question, I'm under the impression that it was part of the language of the measure, and that there was, if not an explicit expectation, then an implicit expectation that that was going to be part of CFAC's mission. But Scott, please correct me if I'm headed in the wrong direction, but that's why I answered the question that was posed to us today in the way that I did, which is we're planning to use the same process as Measure Q to bring the CFAC the options, and then have you all make a recommendation to the City Council based on our collection of projects and uses and the recommendation that we make to you all, and then translate that into what's happening at the council level.
Yes, correct, Katie. That it wasn't explicitly stated that Measure Q would be the oversight committee or CFAC. It just references there will be an oversight body, and we certainly can spin off another group. This is a fantastic group we have here, and so I think we have to formalize that partnership with Measure E with council, and we'll be doing that soon.
Okay, so council will be adopting some kind of resolution.
That's what my expectation. I have to talk to the attorney, but that's my expectation. We'd have to do something along those lines, probably through maybe ahead of the budget or through the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
John, I have one more. I have another Measure E question.
Okay, go ahead.
I know that it's illegal to have enterprise funds give money to the general fund. But is it possible for the general fund to transfer money to enterprise fund?
Yes.
The specific question has to deal with harbor. Can some portion of Measure E be moved off to the harbor fund to help support the harbor fund?
Yes, and enterprise funds can loan to the general fund. But you have to have binding agreements for that to occur.
Right.
But yes, general fund can provide funding to anything without really any recourse. It's open-ended. Measure E, harbor fund has definitely had challenges more so than, say, in some respects, the general fund, and more structural issues. So that certainly is on the table. I think as council moves through the budget process, the Measure E can provide support.
Is that something
relative to the ethics training we just received, things that aren't agendized? This is the second meeting in a row where transferring funds has come up. I suggest that we put this on an agenda for discussion as far as transferring of funds, because as I understood our training, we are not supposed to go into any length other than maybe a minor comment about something not on the agenda.
Well, Bart, this is all within the context of staff's recommendation to transfer what is it, $282,000 from Measure E to the general fund. So I think that's the context in which we're discussing this. Homer?
Well, I was just, the only thing I was going to ask Scott was whether or not this was being discussed internally amongst the staff. That's all.
Yes.
In preparation for the budget.
Right, definitely.
Okay.
Stephen, I saw you raised your hand. Did you have more comments?
Yeah, and I agree with what Homer said. I pounded the pavement a little bit too, like not as much as he did. I think the public would have a negative perception if we weren't spending money directly out of the general fund, which we are, a significant amount of money, and we're sort of using another fund, Measure E, to slug that into the general fund emergency reserve. But I support the idea that, let's get healthy again and get a solid foundation so we can move forward. And I'm pleased that staff's come up with a way to get the staff they need to move forward, spend some money on PD and fire and paving while they're still saving some money. So I appreciate that prudent approach.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Lois.
As long as we're talking about Harbor Fund, the comment about the dry camping, or the information provided about the camping, I understand that's going to the Harbor Fund, the income and expense. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that there were, if I read it correctly, $33,000 in expense and $32,000 in revenue. And now I understand some of that might have been one time, but my neighbors are not really thrilled about this camping. And then when I read that it's actually negative, I thought maybe that needed a little bit more discussion. And as well as what's going on with the paid parking.
Yeah, I can update on that. So you're right, Lois. The upfront costs were, I think they're like in the $20,000 to $25,000 range, and then we anticipate that the ongoing on annual would be somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. We've only run the pilot program for 2.5 months. So our revenue only reflects 2.5 months, where our expenses reflects almost an entire year. So in essence, everything we gain from this point forward would be in excess of cost. We fully expect when we start to get into the, shall we say, peak season, which may have already started last weekend, the hotels were full for 5 days, and all of our RV campsites were full, all 19 spaces. That we'll start to see that those numbers increase significantly and probably net close to $100,000 in positive revenue that would go to the Harbor Fund. The Harbor Fund is about $600,000 in the hole each year for annual maintenance. So $100,000 or $200,000 is a huge help to start moving that ball in the right direction. And as was noted in the discussion with council, those things are what allow people to enjoy the waterfront. Definitely a trade-off between that and maybe some concerns about view shed with RVs parked, Coleman Beach or the Rock. So that's why they extended the pilot program, just to see if those revenues actually bear out. So again, sort of a prudent approach to see how it works. If we can net the $100,000 revenue, which we expect, it certainly is a better selling point to the community. But we definitely heard it loud and clear. There's concerns. That's why they extended the pilot and didn't make it permanent.
What about the parking?
Yes, the paid parking, received a draft report from our consultant who did, they did a study of the Embarcadero downtown, the Rock area in the summer months during the week and weekend, and then came back in November, week and weekend, just to see variation and understand the parking demand. There's definitely some sections of the Embarcadero during the summer, which are historically pretty full, and potentially parking management can be effective. The Rock is true as well. Downtown, probably not as much. The off-season or less non-peak season, it's a little harder to make that argument. So there's a little bit of fine-tuning needs to be done to determine if there's an ROI for instituting a paid parking plan, because you have to invest in that. It's not free. You have to staff it. That's not free. But if you do it right, you can get the revenues to pay for itself and then actually make improvements in the area. Key to all this is the Coastal Commission would have to approve any paid parking because they could see it as inhibiting coastal access, particularly as they view Morro Bay as a low-cost accommodation epicenter for the Central Coast. So we have a bit of an uphill climb if we wanted to make the argument to them that paid parking is a good thing. So we have our work cut out for ourselves, but we'll be taking that report to Public Works Advisory Board and the HAB Board, and then on to City Council before it would go to Coastal Commission. So there's probably several months before it would get to those bodies.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Getting back to Measure E, I just want to express a concern I have, and that is, when Measure Q was approved by the voters going back, 2006, I think, the City Council adopted a resolution which set forth a very defined budget process for those monies. And there were supposed to be requests from department managers, and then there was an A list and a B list, and there was a very defined process for the appropriation of that money, because they were concerned that the public would be, I guess, really concerned about it, and they should be. That's their tax money. And so I think there really shouldn't be any difference between the way that Measure E money is handled compared to Measure Q. And since this is the first year, and we're only going to be collecting revenues from the last quarter of the fiscal year, I don't see how it would harm to just follow the same process for Measure E, and then you just start the budget year with some residual carryover that you can use in your 21-22 budget without transferring that money to the general fund. I think that would be much more transparent and accountable to the public, and it'd be easier for us to do oversight. If we're supposed to produce an annual report on how the money was spent, what do you say? Well, the money was transferred. Well, how was it spent? Well, to support general fund. See, I don't think that really comports to the system that was set up for Measure Q, and so that's why I'm concerned about your approach to Measure E.
That's a great point, John. We don't have a resolution, a non-binding resolution like Measure Q has. Council may choose to take that up. Again, I think I point back to the fact the measure is a recovery measure, and I think the argument can be made that we're replenishing lost reserves, and I think that's an important position that I think we can stand behind as a city, that we got a once in a lifetime, once in a generation, or 100-year pandemic that wiped away almost a third of our reserves, and we need to replenish those so we can be ready for the next emergency. I think we can sell that to our community. Definitely hear what you're saying, but there isn't any mechanism set up at this time. We can take that input to the council, though, for sure.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had to say about that. There were, I think, 3 or 4 questions that were submitted, Katie, that you had, part of your answer was that the staff would address those at the meeting. So can we take a look at those?
Sure.
The first one was question 18 about cash flow.
Yeah, I made an assumption which may have not been a correct assumption, but the header that question came under was the previous item.
Oh, okay.
I figured that would get asked during that discussion, and Eric actually showed that.
Okay, let's move on to the next one then. Question 22. That's also the prior one. Okay.
Yep.
Let's see. Question 29. Oh yeah, that has to do with the engineering for the upcoming paving project being rather high figure.
And Mr. Liebig is still with us, so if that's a question that is still relevant, which I think it is, I'm going to ask Rob to answer that question.
I don't have those questions up on my screen, so if you want to move on, I'll look up that question and.
Well, let me. It's a very short question.
Okay.
The budget shows $147,000 for engineering and consulting for a $478,000 paving project, and that just seemed like it's more than 30%. That seemed like a high number.
Yes, it does seem like a high number to me as well. And we've already spent engineering for the update of the pavement management plan. I think I'm going to need to relook at those numbers and see how they were developed. But I agree. Seems like an awful high number for engineering for the pavement management plan that we plan on doing this year when we already have the plans developed.
Okay, all right.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Chairman, I believe that comes out of the detailed, out of the budget.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure that those numbers get done in a pretty global way before there's actually project work that gets done on it, Rob, and then once we spend less on that particular line item, it goes into the actual work.
Correct.
So if we don't spend that money on that for that purpose, which it doesn't sound like we're going to spend that much on the engineering part of it, we would actually make the investment in the actual implementation of the plan.
Yeah, the only engineering that we have left to do is the actual field engineering, where we need to pull samples of the asphalt product and do materials testing on so we can develop the pay estimates. So we pay based on the amount of compaction that gets placed. So we'll have an outside testing firm and inspection firm that will assist with that, and that's not 30% of the construction costs.
And none has been spent at this point.
Correct.
0.
Okay. I think that's all I have on that. So let's open it up to public comments. Anthony, do we have anything?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay. Are there any other last-minute comments or questions from the committee? Okay, then we'll move on to the last item on this section, which is
John,
finance.
could I just ask for clarification? I appreciate it, so that I can be sure that I'm articulating the committee as a whole, as opposed to individual observations. Is there anything that you all want staff to convey, because the staff report's going out today before your meeting concluded? So I'm going to verbally tell the council, and so I can certainly tell them that there was a discussion about the appropriateness of spending Measure E without using the process that has typically been used in the past. It doesn't sound like there's, a particular position that CFAC's taking on that issue, but I can say that there was a discussion of that issue. Is there anything else that you all want me to highlight for the council?
Well, I would just, there's a big caveat there that the council hasn't even given us the oversight role for that measure yet. So we can give our opinions, but they really haven't even officially signed us.
They may want to consider a resolution 46-12 for Measure E. Okay. That's the resolution that defined the uses of Measure Q.
Yep.
You also need to tell them that you're as conservative as Ms. Callaway was.
Say that again.
That you are as conservative as Ms. Callaway was.
I like it. Keep it up, Katie. In good company.
I'd rather be in a position to say there's more than I told you there would be than less.
Okay, well, Katie, let's move on to the next item, which is your update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and CFAC members. I just wanted to give the committee an update on the forecast that's coming to council next week. I have been feverishly working on it for a long time with the help of members of our team here in the office, particularly Val, who's done a miraculous job of helping to get the model cleaned up and ready to roll out. We will be presenting to the City Council next week. I've done some preliminary assessments about the ongoing costs that we're proposing for mid-year and whether that would be covered by the general fund revenues if we matched, when we took 50% and then also added some property tax, because I believe that the county is proposing or estimating that we will have a 4% growth in our property tax because of the robust nature of the transactions that are happening in the county. And historically, we've gone back and looked, and Morro Bay has absolutely kept pace with those increases and occasionally those decreases that the county assessor and tax collector's office has proposed. It appears that we may be a little bit short given the overall estimates of both revenues and these annualized costs of the additions that we're asking for. But that takes into account not any contributions for some of the funds that are supporting the things that are priorities for Measure E, having the Measure E help as Measure Q has helped in the past. So I'm anticipating, as you articulated, that we will use the same process that Measure Q has used. I get that we need to formalize that, and I'm anticipating that CFAC will be the body that will implement that. I'm also looking at a way for us to be able to articulate in a more comprehensive and robust way what the money's going for. So right now, by sheer necessity, I believe we have little pots of money going towards a lot of different things. And so if there's a way for us to be able to convert that into a lot of major, bigger investments so that you all can, one, be able to see more clearly that we're spending that money exactly the way that it was intended. You can see it now, but the administrative work that goes into tracking overtime hours for certain police officers, by tracking little pockets of investment in supplies and expenses for different departments, is a pretty big task that happens behind the scenes. And so if we can streamline that process, when we make that presentation to you all, I'm looking at trying to make that happen in the next budget process so that we can look at it more comprehensively, so that we're making the investments that are consistent with both of those measures. So I have no doubt that those investments are consistent, but maybe to streamline so that we can articulate in a little bit more cohesive and concise way what we're making the investments on. So that, I don't have any earth-shattering news for you to be able to say, well, here's what the forecast is going to stay, because I'm still working on it, and we'll probably be working on it up until the last minute for publication tomorrow.
Thank you, Katie. So I just had one question for you. In fact, I sent you an email about the OPEB actuarial valuation.
Oh, yes, John. Yes, we will be able to provide it to you. I just have I believe that I have it in my inbox. I just haven't had the opportunity to send it to you given the mid-year budget. So the short answer is yes, we'll send it to the whole committee. It's the OPEB, the other post-employment retirement benefits. So predominantly what we pay CalPERS Health to provide employees the opportunity to buy into the CalPERS Health system, the actuarial report associated with that. So we will send it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are there any other comments? Barbara, you got your mic on?
Oh, that's because I never turned it off. Thank you. No. Thanks, Katie. I agree with, I guess we don't need to see every time we spend $129 on, trash bags for the doggies. And if you can segregate that or at a higher level, I think that's useful. You can always run the detailed reports if somebody wants to see them. But and I would echo John's comments. I think you understand the importance of getting the process for Measure E laid out. So thank you for all that.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
I had a question, Mr. Chairman, for Katie. I know you're still working on the 10-year forecast, but could you give us a flavor for what sort of growth you're assuming or seeing in hotel revenue? What's the go forward? I looked at some occupancy numbers. It looked like we were growing at about 2.5% to 3% on our occupancy, and sales tax or sales might have been 3.5%. What's kind of your go forward thought as to how those things are going to grow over time?
Yeah, historically it's been growing somewhere between the amount has been growing anywhere between 2% and 5% until it took a nosedive last year.
Right.
So again, I'm being fairly conservative in terms of my growth projections. We do have 10 new rooms that have come online. And so basically what I'm hoping for next year is I'm putting in the forecast that we get back to a 2018-19 base.
Great.
Because last year was the 19-20 year was a down year from the previous year. And one of the things that we're experiencing is, you're right, the occupancy is staying strong, but our average daily room rate is declining until we got to September, October, and November of last year, because the hotels knew that they could charge kind of whatever they wanted to. So, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not, that's a business decision which benefits the city. So I hope I've answered your question. It's a little bit, because the economy is so, the travel economy is so unusual right now. I don't want to overestimate that we're going to replicate what we had September, October, November, and I don't want to replicate the downturn, because I know that if I underestimate revenues significantly, the council and the community get unhappy with us because the investments aren't able to be made that everybody wants.
Yeah. And the counter to that, and I appreciate your approach, is that if you straight line that over 10 years, all of a sudden, a percent either way gets compounded, and you either say, whoops, we could have done this thing if we sort of went baseline on it rather than under baseline. So I'm just kind of reinforcing the fact that a number we have to sort of get really comfortable with. So thank you.
Yep.
And then in addition to that, the last time Highway 1 washed out, it harmed the tourism in Morro Bay. So it's something to consider.
I actually looked at that question when we had the storms last week or the week before, and surprisingly enough, it didn't as much as I thought it would have. I guess part of the reason is if people went up the coast expecting to be able to get to Carmel, they had to turn around and come back and then stay someplace. So I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I did look at that issue to make sure that I wasn't underestimating the rebound, because we have no idea how long the highway is going to be closed.
And they didn't stay in San Simeon? Okay, so
At that hotel on the hill.
any other questions or comments on this item? All right, then how about public comments? Anthony, anyone?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the next meeting is going to be March 16th at 3 p.m. It's not?
It's not. It's in April. Remember I said at the beginning.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
I can tell you. So our meetings, the new schedule that was produced, Tracy did a great job and got me a copy of the council's resolution, which I have here in my inbox. So just to reiterate for the committee, all of the meetings that we have during the year, we have January, February, April, May, August, November, and December. And that aligns with the budget process. It aligns with the quarterly reports for the WRF. And that's what the council approved after the staff came to you all to get your concurrence.
Okay, so then April 20th?
Yes.
Okay, and between now and then, you're going to be having your budget meetings with the council, the special meetings?
No, my understanding of the process and the way that they adopted it was that we would be working internally. I can send the committee the calendar that the council approved for the budget process. So it's mostly internal work that's happening now. As an example, we've started to send out the narrative sections of the budget for departments to update those with their performance indicators and making sure that there's nothing that substantively needs to change, not related to the numbers, but related to their mission and all the other narrative. And then on March 3rd, we send out the budget worksheets. Before then, hopefully next week, we're sending out what I have historically called budget enhancement requests, so that if the department wants some of Measure E money or Measure Q money or general fund money, if we have any to dedicate in addition to our baseline, we would have a more systematic approach to receiving those requests and be able to keep track of them and then make what I'll call analytical decisions about what we're going to fund in a bigger picture way.
Okay. Yeah, if you could send us that calendar, that would be helpful.
Okay.
And I guess you're going to send that, and you're going to send the OPEB actuarial report.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess that does it for today. So it is 4:54. Anything else? And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.